If your watercolor figures don't look like watercolor figures, in this video I'm gonna share with you the 3 mistakes that most of my students make when it comes down to watercolor figures, and the 3 levers, the 3 solutions in order to create convincing watercolor figures. Before we dive into this video, I need to mention that I am no expert at all in figures, figures painting, but those techniques that I'm gonna share with you allowed me to create this painting, this painting, this one, this one, this one, and this one. In order to understand the 3 levers we are going to pull, we need to dive into the human body. A human body consists of a skeleton, then we have the flesh and also the clothes, and after that we have the light. So here is a live painting workshop that I did with my students, and it was dedicated to the figures. And I took a photo from one of my students, and it was about this live scene, and we decided to create these figures. So the first mistake that I see when it comes down to figure painting is that the proportion of the body doesn't feel right, and also the arm is a little bit off compared to the body, same for the legs and so on. So in order to solve this issue, what I do first is create the skeleton of the body. So here, as you can see, the head is straight. It's a vertical angle. And then you have the shoulder, and the shoulder, what I do is just replicate the angle of the shoulder, like the bones here. It's not exactly a bone, but the idea here is to make sure that the angles of the shoulders are right. And then the chest here, it's completely vertical, and you will see that sometimes it's vertical, sometimes it's horizontal, and sometimes it's diagonal. And when I look at the arm here, it's exactly the same. You don't need to make the drawing and so on, but just roughly, you make sure that the angles are right. And this is the first mistake that many people do when it comes down to figures. It's that they don't look closely at the angles of each arm, of each leg, of the chest, of the head. And then when you have the structure of your skeleton, then you can go just for the painting of the whole figure first. And you can see with the mop brush, I just have to follow the lines that I draw. And here I can move forward, and you can see in the end, we have roughly the same feeling for this specific watercolor figure. And just after, I did the woman just beside the man, and exactly the same thing here is quite squared, the shoulder. They are wide, it's quite angular, and for the woman, it's different. It's more round, more in a circle. The shoulders, they fall a little bit more compared to the man. And just by observing, okay, compared to the man, how does the skeleton work? And then it's not about only the skeleton, because here I can also draw the dress of the woman, the coat. And here you can see I didn't put a single pencil stroke here. It's just the mop brush, but as I have in mind, okay, this is the angle and this is a little bit squared or it's a little bit round, then I can just go with the flow. And in the end, you can see that you have watercolor figures that have been painted in minutes, even in seconds sometimes, just by avoiding this mistake of trying to paint the body instead of painting angles. The second mistake that people do in terms of figure painting is the fact that, as you can see here on the arm is not just vertical, it's sometimes a little bit bent. And this is a second mistake that people do. They tend to think that, okay, an arm it's just straightforward, it's just a line, but in the end it's not. And just by observing, okay, this arm, it's a little bit on the left first, on the lower, and then it's even more bent here. Just by observing that, you will avoid 99% of the mistake when it comes down to figure painting in watercolor. So the skeleton, it's more about the posture and the proportion. And by the way, consider that you have 1 unit when it comes down to the height of the head, and you just need then to duplicate this length 3 times for the chest and another 3 times for the legs. Sometimes it's a little bit more for the legs because they are a little bit longer than the chest. But overall, if you follow this rule, you will be fine. The second point, it's about the outline, about the flesh, and it allows you, by observing exactly the angles and so on, it allows you to have a more convincing figure. It will avoid the little bit like the robot effect when it comes down to a human body. But thing is that even though you master the first step with the skeleton and the second step with the flesh and the outline, still some figures won't work. For example, this is a picture taken from one of my students. And if you look at this woman here, it's complicated because if you just put her head and then the arms and then the dress and the legs here, you won't be able to really understand what's going on here because the music instrument she's playing, you won't be able to see it. So sometimes, and this is the third point, sometimes people take a topic, a subject, a figure that is too difficult to understand just by the outline. So what I suggest instead is not choosing that kind of topic because this is another way of painting figures. Instead, first train yourself, make some practice figure painting with, for example, when you look at on the side of the figure. For this one, for example. And as you can see, this is exactly what we do. Okay, here it's a little bit bent on the right. This one is a little bit bent on the left. And you can see that I do exactly that. This is a skeleton. And then the flesh, the outline, I just follow these figures, these angles that I just draw. And as you can see here, even though the result, it doesn't look exactly as the subject. The point here is not to make a clone of a photo. The point here is to make a watercolor figure that can stand out by itself. So the third advice here is to select figures where the outline is self-sufficient. You don't need to detail everything inside the figures in order to make it readable. You pick a topic, you pick a figure where it's possible to understand in one blink without any detailed texture inside the figure. You understand in no time, okay, what's going on here. And if you want to know more about how I create my own watercolor painting with no tutorial, click on the link in the description below. Thank you and bye-bye.